Can you hear me now? All right. Well, welcome, First United Methodist Church. And you have just been listening to our praise band who leads our music for our 9 o'clock contemporary worship here in the sanctuary. We have a choir that handles our music during our traditional worship service, and that's at 11 o'clock. And they just have a way also of making those old-time hymns come alive. And if you were able to join us for Chili earlier this evening, you heard the big band music of the After Hours Band, and they were nice enough to donate their time, but they are available for hire as well for private parties. Also, as you came in, if either the entrance here to the north or the back of the sanctuary, perhaps you picked up one of these. There are some door prizes that local businesses have offered, and we'll go ahead and draw those names later tonight. If you haven't had an opportunity to fill out one of these, you can get the receipt either at the back of the sanctuary here or as you leave the church. And now I'd like to introduce the man of the evening, and gosh, I've been watching him since 1996. He's been the weatherman. Most of you are familiar with him, I'm sure. He's been very successful in his line of work. He's been voted top meteorologist by the 417 and the Springfield News Leader for 9 years in a row, I believe. Isn't that correct, Brandon? Or 10? And so please join me in welcoming Brandon Beck. Brandon?
Thank you. Good evening. I've got to be very careful. I have an open cup here. I don't want to spill it on any. For about 3.5 minutes at a time. Don't necessarily need a drink. Although there was one time, we talk about bloopers. A lot of people want to know, what's the funniest thing that's ever happened to you, or most embarrassing thing? I can't share some of that stuff, but there was one time where something happened in my throat and I started coughing and I couldn't quit. And I just kind of had to do one of these and back up off the screen, and Steve Grant got up off the desk and gave me some water, and I almost had to go to a commercial break. But anyway, a pointless story. I have a lot of those, by the way. Thank you for coming tonight. A little cold out, but not brutally cold. Just give you a little bit about myself. I used to have hair when I started in 96. In fact, I look at some videos and pictures of that, and I think, good night, man. Why did my wife let me have hair like that? When it first started leaving, I got these little things right here, so I'd have a little patch right there. Looked hideous. But I was attached to it, no pun intended. So it took a while for me to actually be willing to say, all right, bzzz. And then it looked, Dad, you're bald. No, I'm not bald. I'm close to bald. That's not the same as bald. I have 3 sons, 17. I know, I don't look that old, do I? Did I already scare her? 17, so he's going to start college next year. And, I remember my parents telling me as I grew up that time flies, and you just never have an appreciation for that until you have your own kids. And then it's like, wait a minute, I changed your diaper 2 weeks ago. Now you're going to graduate from high school. I have a middle one that's 14. He's taller than me. He grew 5.5 inches in a year. Dad, I need new jeans. I just bought you new jeans. I know, but I outgrew them. Excuse me? And then I have a 12-year-old who I think will follow the same path not too far from now. I have a wonderful wife whose name is Cindy, and she's hot stuff. I love her a lot, but she's hot stuff. I'll just tell you right here from the pulpit, but that's okay. Very, very proud of her and my family, and very blessed to do what I do. I joke with people. It's like, look, I know the weatherman jokes, right? I can get wrong half the time and still get paid. I know. But you know what? You're all going to turn the TV on in the morning to see what I have to say. Yeah? So there, I might be wrong, but you're still going to listen. It is an educated guess, but that's how it works. And, there are days that we miss it, and I'm grumpy those days. Want to talk to you tonight about a subject totally different than weather, and this is sort of the passion for me. I grew up in the church, but everybody's faith becomes their own faith at some point in life. You may have grown up in the church your entire life, but if you haven't had a moment that was defining for you, then you still have your parents' faith, or your friend's faith, or your pastor's faith, or whatever it is. There's a point in life I have found that are defining moments, not just in life in general, but when it comes to God and how you interact with God. And I had one of those that began a journey for me about 3 years ago that has, and I don't mean this as a cliche, has absolutely changed my life. It's changed how I've looked at God. It's changed my relationships, not just with God, but with my wife and my kids and others around me. And I want you to know, first off, and I think that your pastor would probably agree, or if you're visiting and you don't normally attend church, you could talk to what we would consider as, in the Christian culture, we have these people that we look up to that we think, like let's take, for instance, Billy Graham. Most people, even if you don't follow Christ, would recognize the name Billy Graham and say, wow, that's a big name. He would tell you he doesn't have it all together. He doesn't have all the answers. I'm not here tonight because I figured it all out, all right? I'm here tonight because God's done a work in my life, and I want to share that with you because I think my story will resonate with a lot of you. So I want to start with a couple of questions tonight, and I want you to think about these. This isn't like class where I want you to raise your hand. But some questions just to ponder. Number one, how do you view God? Just think in your mind. And I'm not asking you to tell me what you have been taught God is like. Okay? There's a difference. How do you view God? Number two, is your relationship with Him active or passive? Okay? Is it something that grows? Oftentimes, Christian faith, you're either going up the hill or you're sliding back down the hill. It's one of the two. You're either growing or you're shrinking. Number three, does your walk with God consist of just church? And finally, and this is the biggie, how do you think God views you? Interesting question. See, I grew up in a church. I was telling my friend Leroy on the way over here, I grew up in the Church of Christ. My wife's, not my wife's, wow, that's one of those slips. My mother's side of the family, got to get those confused, right? Was all Church of Christ, and when my dad left when I was 7, we were pretty much on our own until I was 13 when my mom remarried, and I went from Church of Christ to Assemblies of God. First time I walked into an AG church, I was like, what in the world is this? It's a lot different, right? But I discovered about 3 years ago that my view of God was even different than what I thought it was. And some of the things that I thought about God, and particularly how He thought about me, were a little different than what I would have even told people had you asked me. So here's the way the story goes, and I embellish this just a little bit because I can, because my wife has yet to come to one of these with me, so I can pick on her a little bit. I was at Barnes & Noble bookstore, and I was looking for a specific book, and I couldn't find it. I was frustrated. If you got some time to kill, it's fun to go in there and mosey around, look at a few things. Oh, I didn't know that. Right? Look at things that you can't ever do, like computer books. I'm sort of a computer geek. I know enough to be dangerous, and that's about it. I can destroy your machine. Whether I can fix it or not is a big deal. But I was looking for a book, couldn't find it, and my wife walks over with this book, and she shows it to me, and I'm like, I read the front cover. Oh, okay, fine, whatever. It was one of those things like, okay, I'm ready to go. Let's just get out of here. I read about the first 3 chapters, and I'm not a big reader. I don't typically sit down and just read because I like to. I probably should. But I read about 3 chapters, and I had to put the book down. I was incredibly angry. The book was called Fathered by God, Learning What Your Dad Could Never Teach You. It's by John Eldredge. Anybody ever heard of Wild at Heart? That's one of the most popular books I think that he's written. Talks about the stages of a boy's life, and he includes some of those in this book. So I'm going to be real brief with these. And ladies, don't think that this you can just tune out and think about whatever else you want to think about, all right? This is kind of important too, because it might help you understand either your kids or your husband or whatever. The stage begins with boyhood, where a boy learns that he is the beloved son, and he's entirely delighted in by his father. That's the goal. This is the kind of the stage in life where you do things like you go fishing, you go camping. That's what I think of anyway. You play catch, whatever it is, that you create those memories with your dad. And basically the idea is that your dad is in love with you. Dad longs to be with you. Then it moves into the cowboy stage, and this is sort of the teens and early 20s where adventure and danger. I mean, that's built into a man, period. That's why kids like to climb up the furniture and jump off. That's why there's no... My littlest son, when he was in a diaper, when we'd go swimming, didn't matter if you were there to catch him. He'd just run and jump in because he'd like to swim. It's just sort of wired that way. Following that, boy becomes a warrior. He often leaves home. He pursues a cause or a mission. At about the same time, and hopefully not before, the man's learning that life is a battle. The warrior must learn to fight for his beloved and become a lover, but still remains a warrior for the rest of his life. And then many years later, with the right humility and direction, the warrior/lover becomes a king, and that means he sort of is over his dominion, if you want to call it that. He's got a family. He steps into true leadership, responsibility, guiding, kind of directs the lives of others, gives advice. And then lastly, he finishes his last years as a sage, sharing his wisdom with other men and women, sort of guiding them in their journey. Well, let me sidestep from that just a second and talk real briefly about divorce, all right? Because this is my world. This is where I come from. Children from, and these are studies that I just looked up. Children from divorced homes suffer academically. They experience high levels of behavioral problems. Their grades suffer. They're less likely to graduate from high school. Kids whose parents divorce are substantially more likely to be incarcerated for committing a crime as a juvenile. Custodial parents' income usually drops, so there's likely poverty involved. I remember thinking when I was a kid, my mom gave me $5 once, and I thought I was rich. It was hard to get food, so on and so forth. Teens from divorced homes are much more likely to get involved in drug and alcohol use, sexual behavior, than from those with intact families. Children from divorced homes experience illness more frequently, and they suffer from psychological distress. Emotional scars last into adulthood. One study found that young adults, 18 to 22, they did this survey, 65% of them had a poor relationship with dad, 30% with mom, 25% had dropped out of high school, 40% had received psychological help. Now you think about that, and think about a lot of the other ones that just didn't get the help or didn't know they needed the help. I was one of those that got help. See, kids need their dads to validate their self-worth. Now, that may seem far-fetched, but I'm telling you from experience that that is true. Many problems can come to the family and future relationships for children when a dad is absent or not involved with his kids like he needs to be. What about a dad who's there but isn't? You probably all know one of those. Maybe not yours, but you know of someone. He's a workaholic, or when he is home, he's yelling at his kids. He's not involved with them. He's just kind of like, yeah, whatever, leave me alone. He's in his own little world. It's about him. Well, either way, it's a problem because it can lead to a child's loss of self-confidence and identity. They begin thinking they're not important or not worthy of dad's attention, or worse yet, that they're a burden. As a result, they can develop insecurities and anxieties, and they may never feel like they measure up or are good enough, not to anyone. So kids from a divorced family, typically, if dad's gone, they're left feeling rejected, unwanted, insecure, unstable, and anxious. And all these feelings can automatically transfer to other relationships. Now, for those that kind of may think, okay, whatever, that's a whole bunch of stats. Those are studies that have been done over years and years and years. And the reason that all of that's important is because as I read this book and I started realizing all these different stages that a boy goes through as he grows up, all these light bulbs started coming on. I'm like, wait a minute. That's me. That's why I struggle with this or that or this. That's why I feel insecure about these things. And that's why I'm always feeling like I have to measure up. And guess what? Dad left when I was 7, and I missed out. I realized the things that I'd missed out on, and I realized how much of all of these internal struggles were because of this issue. And I was ticked. I was upset. I was so angry at my dad. He actually showed up a couple months later. I have a very superficial relationship with my dad, even today. We would tell each other that we love each other, but there's really no meat to that relationship. And I was so mad I didn't know what to say to him because I felt like I had the right to be upset with him. But at the same time, I found out from my grandmother that my grandfather, or his dad, there but not there, never went to ball games. All of those things that a boy craves from his dad were gone. All of that is a preface to this. How we look at God is often a mirror reflection of how we see our earthly fathers. And that's not me telling you. That's the research that's been done. That's the psychologists and all of that, the counselors. So whatever we take away from our relationship with Dad, we view God much the same way. Harsh, demanding, angry, disappointed, untrustworthy, abandoning, unloving, uninterested. If we can just be good enough, if we can just mind our P's and Q's and do all the right things and do what we need to do to make Dad be interested in us, to make Dad love us, to make Dad want to be around us. And we treat God the same way. Despite being taught that God's love is free for the taking, because our whole worldview has been shaped by this gaping hole that Dad has left. Now, moms have an important role too, and sometimes they can leave gaps too, but I'm focusing on Dad because this is a men's group for the most part, and I'm talking as a man whose dad was gone. The funny thing is that even though we are taught about what God or who God is and that He's love, that He's unconditional love, somehow we just don't believe it. We just don't take it at face value. We feel as though we can't be good enough and we have to earn God's love. So we never experience a true, intimate relationship with Him. So let's see if you can kind of place yourself in one of these three categories. Now, maybe your relationship with God is fantastic. Maybe you have a great understanding of who He is and you walk with Him daily. But, unless I miss my guess, there are a few categories that I think a lot of people, even in the church, see God as. And a lot of people outside the church would see God perhaps as a dictator, demanding, ready to pounce on your every mistake, right? I used to use this example, and I would have tonight if I'd thought about it. You have a little doll, and, God's up here with a baseball bat. Oh, you messed up. Boom! Just ready to just pounce on us. The whole idea of hell is that God is waiting for you to mess up. Worship me now or else. That's the view some people have of God. Maybe some people think He's a cosmic killjoy. He's just a bunch of rules and regulations. Yeah, I don't want to be a Christian because there's this long list of things I got to do. And then there's a longer list of things that I can't do. God just wants to ruin my fun. Maybe you think of God as a CEO. That's kind of how I thought of God, believe it or not. And I wouldn't have admitted that, didn't realize it. But let's look at it this way. At KY3, we have about 180 employees. I didn't realize that either until I asked. There is a corporate owner, Schurz Communications, and the name of the guy that's the CEO of our division, the broadcasting division, is Todd Schurz. Now, I've met the guy. He comes in a couple times a year. He talks about he's really nice. Knows who I am, shakes my hand, he'll chat with you, blah, 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 blah. I'm on his team. Work for the guy in an indirect way. Wanted to be successful. He wants me to be successful, yada, yada, yada. But I don't know him, and he really doesn't know me. So some people think of God that way. They come to church, they're on God's team, go God. They might be moral people, they might be good, upstanding citizens, and all of that, but they don't really know God. They just know about God. There's a big difference. Now, if you'll permit me to stomp on a few toes here and translate this into church culture today. All right, now this isn't the United Methodist Church in West Plains. This isn't my church in Springfield. This isn't my home church in Colorado. This is just the church in general. This is my observation after having learned what I've learned. I think that a lot of times church completely misses the point. I'll just be frank. The Christian life is about doctrine. All right? And you know that in a lot of denominations, we argue about this and that. Well, I don't believe that. Those people over there, they go into hell because they believe this or they don't believe that. We got it right. We believe this. It's sort of senseless if you think about it. It's about the do's and the don'ts. It's about being a good person, and you've got to uphold a certain image. You got to wear the right things. Oh, holy cow, if you wear, I remember growing up as a teenager, if I saw somebody with spiky hair and earrings or a tattoo, that's sort of the mentality. So, well, they don't fit the mold, right? You got to be involved in all the church activities, and then in our pretty little church culture, we tend to judge people who don't fit the mold. We say, hey, everybody's welcome, but if somebody was to walk into this church with tattoos and earrings and scruffy-looking clothes, what would happen to them? Would they be welcomed and shown a seat, or would they be avoided? Be a good litmus test. We'll keep an eye on you. Here's a question. If people aren't good enough for us, then how in the world could they be good enough for the God we say we serve and we claim loves them unconditionally? See, there's a big difference between walking with God and fitting into church culture. You can fit into church culture, but that's not the same thing. If you're spiritual and that's it, a lot of people can do that. It's being dutiful. It's being busy at church. But it often replaces the true walk with God. You remember the story, and I don't remember exactly the verses, but the disciples, bless their little hearts, you ever thought, man, there's no hope for me? Just read stories about the disciples. They were a bunch of dopes. And they just didn't get it. But God used them to teach us. And here's the story. And they're arguing about who's the greatest. And remember that in the Old Testament, man, if you think Christianity's a bunch of do's and don'ts, you ever read Leviticus? Holy cow. That's like, if you want to torture somebody, put them in a cell and make them read Leviticus 5 times. It's just, you can't do this, but you can do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. It was law after law after law after law after law, and you had to memorize them all. And if you messed up on one of them, you had to go make a sacrifice at the temple. It was quite the system. Thankfully, God replaced that system. But the disciples were asking, okay, Jesus, all right, out of all of that, what's the greatest command? What's the most important one? What'd he say? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, and your mind. It wasn't, well, do this list of things and then you'll be good enough. No, it was love God with all that you are. How about the story of Nicodemus? Now, here's a good point. I'm going to read to you from John chapter 3. Now, there was a man of the Pharisees. I think there was a song in kids' church about the Pharisees and Sadducees. Wouldn't want to be a Sadducee because they're so sad, you see. Something like that. That's really how it went. Anyway, there was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. Now, keep in mind that in that day, to be a ruler of the Jews like Nicodemus was, he could quote the entire Old Testament. I mean, it was ridiculous what they had to do just to get to certain points. But this man came to Jesus by night. He didn't want to be seen. And he said to him, Rabbi, we know that you're a teacher that comes from God, for no one can do these signs like you do unless God is with them. Jesus answered him, Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. And Nicodemus is like, what? How can a man be born again when he's old? Can he enter a second time into his mother's womb and be born? Jesus is like, I say to you, unless one is born of water and the Spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. That which is born of flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the Spirit is spirit. Don't marvel that I say to you, you've got to be born again. The wind blows where it wishes, and you hear its sound, but you don't know where it comes from or where it goes. So it is with everyone who is born of the Spirit. And so Nicodemus said to him, How can these things be? Jesus answered him, Are you a teacher of Israel, and yet you don't understand these things? Truly I say to you, we speak of what we know and bear witness to what we've seen, but you do not receive our testimony. And if I've told you earthly things and you don't believe, how can you believe if I tell you heavenly things? And that leads up to, for God so loved the world that he gave his only Son. Whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. So he's telling Nicodemus, a guy who could quote the whole Old Testament. He knew all the laws, all right? But Jesus is telling him, wait a minute, no, that's not what it's about. You've got to be born again. Well, what does that mean? You got to have a whole shift. You got to start over in how you deal with God. So you might have attended church all your life and done all the right things, but Jesus is telling you, you've got to be born again. There's another example in Matthew chapter 21 when we're talking about people who fill the churches but don't really know God. And this is sort of scary to me, and it should make us all go, wow, and kind of take stock. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, did we not prophesy in your name? Now think about that. If any given Sunday, if somebody stood up in one of our churches and claimed to have a prophecy, we'd look at them really funny, most likely. But Jesus is telling us that there are going to be people that say, didn't we prophesy in your name, cast out demons in your name, and do many mighty works? And then I'll declare to them, I never knew you. That is amazing to me. How is it that you can do all that and still not know God? Jesus says it's possible. See, the whole point of Jesus coming to earth was to restore us to him. It's not about the church. It's not about good works. It's not about service, even though those things are important. It's about our hearts. It's about breaking the sin cycle and getting back to the original plan. Think back to the Garden of Eden. God walked in the garden with Adam and Eve, walked and talked with them. And then sin entered the picture and separated us from God. So the whole point, the whole deal about Jesus, who we say we serve and we worship, is for him coming to make that ultimate sacrifice for us, to abolish that whole sacrificial system in the temple, and to say, nope, I'm going to do it for you once and for all. All you got to do is accept my free gift. So he wants us to have intimacy with God. All the other things that we talked about, all of those good works and service and all of that, will then flow out of a heart naturally, and we do them out of love, not obligation or as a way to be spiritual. So here's the deal. If I'm saying our view of God is twisted, well, what is it supposed to be like? Well, it's supposed to be intimate. Life, for most of us, gets in the way of this. Now, we talked about divorce. We talked about not having a dad and how that has a huge impact. But then there's a whole bunch of other stuff in life that can also do that. You've got failure, you've got disappointment, expectations, betrayal, rejection, pain, and all of it shapes us. A lot of it wounds us, and our hearts become sort of disconnected. See, we have this idea, and most of us wouldn't say it out loud if somebody asked us. Most of us have this idea that as Christians, if we are doing the right things and we are serving God and we are loving him, that somehow we're supposed to be immune to pain, like our life is supposed to go on and be good. And when bad things happen, we start to question, well, now, wait a minute. Well, I don't understand, God. I'm serving you. I'm loving you. I'm doing what I'm supposed to. I'm going to church all the time. And, well, how come? What's going on? So we know pain's a part of life, and we sort of act disheartened and surprised when it occurs. So we take those wounds, we take those disappointments, we take those things that are tragic in our lives, and we start to take it as if, well, I must not be doing it right. I must not be quite good enough for God. And so we fall into the trap of believing the enemy's lies. Well, who's our enemy? Well, if we're going to say that there is a God and he is real and that we worship him, guess what? You have an enemy. You can't take this part but not this part. In Ephesians 6, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. You know the verses, right? Right. The powers of this dark world. There are spiritual forces that want to do anything possible to separate you from God. And I think divorce is one of them. But there are a lot of lies, and these all are different for every person. See, God really doesn't love you. Or you're praying about something, you're concerned about something, you're anxious about something. God isn't going to help you. He doesn't care. You know the voices that come into your mind, the thoughts that fly through, and you try to, no, I know better than that. But sometimes we take them to heart. Where's God? You've made him mad. This is your fault. If you hadn't, fill in the blank. Or one that I struggle with all my life. Everyone else is better than you. You can't. You're not. No. Who do you think you are? See, you screwed it up again. When will you learn? And so when we believe those things, we withdraw from God. when we should run to him. So what about God's love for us individually? I just want to take you through a few scriptures, all right? If you have this view of God like he's just ready to pounce on your every mistake, maybe these are for you. In Ephesians chapter 3, Paul's talking here, and he says, I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power together with all the Lord's holy people to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge. We don't get it. I don't care how much you say you love your spouse or you love your kids. It doesn't compare to God's love for you. We just don't get it because there's nothing on earth that compares to it. It's beyond our comprehension. Because most of us would say, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool you 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times, whatever it is. Remember the disciples asking Jesus, well, how many times should we forgive somebody who sins against us? 7? They thought they were doing good. Like, we spiritual. We're going to get 7 times. Jesus is like, nah, 70 times 7. In other words, unlimited. Giving us an example of, you know what? Yes, there is sin. Yes, we are to live holy lives. But God also knows that we're made of dust and we're going to mess up. But his mercies are new every morning. How about this one? Psalm 129. This is one of my favorite ones. This is David talking. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I'm still with you. David he knew what it was to have an intimate walk with God. He understood that God was with him all the time, and he knew everything about him. A lot of us know this one, Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I'll listen to you. You'll seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. In Romans 5, but God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. 1 John 3:1. These next two are some of the most powerful scriptures I personally think that there are when it comes to what's God's heart toward us. 1 John 3:1. See what great love the Father has lavished on us that we should be called children of God. And that's what we are. Do you understand that? We're not just part of some mass of people. God's not just on some distant throne up there and we're all just kind of on the same massive crowd going, rah, rah, God. No, God knows each one of us individually. He calls us his children. How about Galatians 4? Because you are his sons, God sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts. The Spirit who calls out, Abba, Father. So you're no longer a slave, but God's child. And since you're his child, God has made you also an heir. As it's explained to me, Abba is the closest word in our language to daddy. Now, I don't know about you, but when I first heard that, I couldn't grasp that. Because most of us don't look at God that way. Most of us would think of calling God daddy as almost disrespectful. Like it doesn't give him the honor he deserves. It's right there. Yes, God deserves honor. Yes, we praise him. Yes, he's far greater than any of us could ever imagine. But he also reduces himself to us calling him daddy. That's the spirit that he puts in our hearts. That is intimate. Psalm 103. As high as heaven is over the earth, so strong is his love to those who fear him. And as far as sunrise is from sunset, he has separated us from our sins. Get this. for all you parents. As parents feel for their children, God feels for those who fear him. That's incredible. Incredible. If that doesn't blow your misconception of God as some big bad wolf up in the sky away, as you care for your children, you do anything for them. Yeah, sometimes you get a little frustrated with them. You ever watch Back to the Future? It's one of my favorite movie series ever. And there's a line in there where Biff, "Hello, McFly!" Sometimes I feel like that with my kids. I'm like, are you kidding me? Or did you really just do that? I get frustrated with them sometimes. But you know what? I'd do anything for them. And as much as I love my own kids, God's saying, as you feel for your kids, God feels for you. That's amazing. He knows us inside and out, keeps in mind that we're made of mud. So let me challenge you with a few final thoughts. And I talked about how absolutely critical a dad's role is in the family and how twisted my view of God was because of the lack of that influence. And maybe you didn't come from that sort of background. But dads in this room, I want to challenge you. It's your deal. You make it or break it. You're not the only influence, but you are the biggest influence in your kids' life. You are the leaders of your home. So set an example of what it means to walk with God. Pray frequently. Let's talk to God. An intimate walk with him is praying about everything. Philippians, don't worry, pray. Are you worried about something? Pray. With thankfulness, submit all your requests to God, and the peace that passes all understanding will guard your hearts and minds. What an incredible promise. I get tied up in knots sometimes, I'll admit it. I am a worrywart because I feel like I got to fix stuff. Part of that's the man in me, I guess. But you know what? I rest on that verse. God, I'm concerned about this. I don't know what to do, but you do. You see this much, I see this much. Help me. And we come in confidence knowing that God hears us. Men, pray and read from the Bible together as a family. Here's one that never occurred to me until 3 years ago. Pray with your spouse. There's amazing power in that. And there's amazing unity in that. Share your journey with God together. And involve God in your daily life and decisions. Seek to honor him in all that you do. Pray for your kids, for their decisions, and for them to know God's voice. One of my prayers, and I pray it with everything that's in me. I don't care what my kids do. Yeah, I want them to have a good career. I want them to be successful. I want them to make a good living. I don't want them to struggle and all that sort of stuff. But that is secondary for them knowing God and hearing his voice and walking with him. Second, and you probably get all confused in the numbers here, but you are a reflection of God to your kids. How they see you is often how they see God. So, love on your kids every day. Spend time with them. Show an interest in them individually and what they like. It does wonders. Spend more time praising them than criticizing them. It's easy, and I gotta watch myself on this. It's easy to see something that they were supposed to do that they didn't, or that they yell at their brother, or they hit their brother, whatever it may be, and say, but if I don't follow that up with, hey, I'm proud of you for this. This is what I see in you, and I love that about you. If you grew up like me and never had that, does wonders for a kid. And don't expect anything from your kids that you don't personally model. That's a biggie. You know what, dads? You can take your kids to church every time the doors are open. And you can have them involved in everything. But if you don't model what it is to walk with God and have an intimate walk with him, then all you've taught your kids is that it's important to go to church. Ask God to reveal to you what an intimate relationship with him is like. If this is new to you, like it was to me a couple years back, and again, it's not that I have it all put together and that hey, I've arrived, everybody. Let me give you a 10-step process to intimacy with God. No, it's not that. It's you and God. It's asking him, hey, God, maybe there's more to this than I thought there was. Ask him. This will mean being deliberate about spending time in God's presence. Make it a priority. There's sometimes you just need to turn the TV off and spend time talking with God and learn to listen for God's voice. And finally, you have an enemy. Oh, do you have an enemy? The last thing he wants is for you and God to have a relationship that's more than just coming to church. And he'll do anything he can to get in the way. So ask God to help you identify Satan's areas of influence or methods of attack. Know your own weaknesses. Don't put yourself in a vulnerable position. Now, sometimes you can sneak up on you. I get it. I'm just saying. Guard your heart. Be aware and on guard against areas of compromise or weakness in your life, because Satan is going to use anything he can to get distance between you and God. Intimacy with God, that daily back and forth, brings power to your life. Let's pray. God, I thank you for the amazing love that you offer us in spite of our faults. There's no one like you. Absolutely no one that compares, Lord. Yet in our brokenness and in our religion, we've distorted you. And for those who have viewed you as anything but a savior, a friend, a help in times of trouble, Father, I pray that you'd speak to their hearts tonight. We are an imperfect people in need of your perfect love. I just want to give you a couple of moments here, and I'd like everybody to keep their heads bowed. And I'm not going to make this awkward. I don't want to make it awkward for you. And if you're visiting tonight, I want to address three possible groups of people here tonight. First of all, Christians. You would claim the name of Jesus. You would call him your Savior. Yet you've lived constantly aware of your own failures and your shortcomings. And in a sense, you've kind of walked in your Christian life with your head down, ashamed of the fact that you never can seem to be good enough in your own eyes. Maybe you feel as though you've let God down. My challenge for you tonight is to let God speak to you. He knows right where you're at and longs to show you how much he loves you, even with your weaknesses. Second group I want to talk to is churchy people, if I can put it like that. Maybe you grew up in church. Maybe you volunteer, you give money and time, you consider yourself moral, and you're good. Maybe you're in church every time the doors are open. You might even be able to quote a few verses from the Bible, but if you examine your heart, you'd have to say, you don't really know God. You just know about God. I challenge you to let God speak to you tonight. If what I just described resonates with you, if you feel something tugging at your heart and your mind, God's talking to you. If you say there's never been a moment where you've actually called out to God and asked him to live in your heart and change you from the inside out, then you're not, as Jesus put it to Nicodemus, born again. And I actually want to pray with you tonight. If you would say that, you know what, Brandon, that's me. I thought that I knew God, and I thought that maybe I had a relationship with him, but what you're talking about is far different. I've been to church, and I do the right things, but I don't really know God. If that's you, and you want to know God in a more intimate way, would you just slip your hand up right quick? I'm not going to make you come down to the front. I'm not going to make it awkward. I just want to pray with you. I want to know who I'm praying for. Is there anybody here tonight that kind of hits a nerve for you? You want to know God more intimately, because what you've done so far is just, you've been religious, you've been dutiful, you've been spiritual, you've done the right things. Thank you for those hands. I see those. But you want to be able to walk with God. You want to know God. You want to be able to talk to him. You want to hear God talk to you, because he does that, folks. It's an amazing relationship that is there for the taking. Thank you, sir. The last group of people I want to talk to is maybe you're on the outside looking in. Maybe you're just here tonight because you heard the weatherman was coming and his title sounded sort of controversial. And you thought, I'm going to go see what that's about. Maybe you've thought that Christians are just a bunch of hypocrites. There are some. Maybe you thought that Christians were just a bunch of religious freaks. Well, there are some of those too. But you can't judge who God is based on a few Christians turning you sour, because we're imperfect too. Maybe this whole thing about God being intimate with us and how I've described him tonight is new for you. Maybe you thought of him as a dictator or a CEO, and maybe you thought that this was just a social club with a long list of rules. But I'm telling you, you can know God, and you can have an intimate relationship with him. He loves you. His mercies are new every morning, and he feels for us like we feel for our kids. Yes, we have sin, and we don't always make the right choices, but he loves us anyway. The thing is, you have to invite him in. He gives us the freedom to reject him. You have to be born again, like he told Nicodemus, who was like the ultimate example of the guy who did everything right. It means you have to have a shift in the way you look at God, how you feel and act towards spiritual things. It means you have to put your faith in Jesus to forgive your sins and believe that he's Lord, your Lord. If you genuinely do this, you'll find your entire life will be changed. And the missing link in your life you know is there, but you can't quite put a finger on, can be filled by God. Now, I don't know if there's anyone here like that tonight, that you just thought church was a big joke. You thought God was a big joke. He was the man upstairs. And this is all new to you. If that's you, and you're feeling something right now, that's God talking to you. If you just stick your hand up right quick and let me pray for you, I would appreciate that. I just want to pray for you tonight. I'm not going to make you get up and come down front. I appreciate that. Anybody else? I'll give you just a couple of seconds, and then we're going to pray. Anybody who would say, you know what, I've done the church thing, but I don't really know God, but I want to know him. I want an intimate walk with him. Anybody else? All right, thank you, sir. Let's pray. Father God, I thank you so much for your love. I thank you so much that all we have to do is ask you to come into our hearts. And there's nothing freaky about it. There's nothing weird about it. It's us being able to know God intimately, our Creator. Lord, what an incredible privilege to be called your children. God, if there's anyone here tonight that didn't raise their hand, it's nothing that raising your hand doesn't do anything. It's something that you have to do. You have to ask God and say, Lord, I'm sorry for my sin, but I want you to be Lord of my life. I want to know you. I want to live for you. God knows what's best. His ways are perfect, and his love for you will blow you away. Lord, I pray that you'd speak to their hearts tonight. Draw them to you. And God, for those that have done church for a long time, but have never really had an intimate relationship with you, I pray that you'd open a whole new world for them, God. As they pray and as they seek you, God, I pray that you would respond by speaking to their hearts, that they would know that they've heard your voice, and that you would give them confidence, God, going forward. Thank you, God, that you forgive us, that you love us, that your mercy is new every day. Lord, we love you tonight. We declare your glory. There's no one that compares to you, and we love you tonight. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you guys for having me.